This year is the 800th anniversary of the first crib started by Francis of Assisi in the same season. This is in a week's time. This is a marvelous way of understanding the incarnation of Jesus, taking this humble nature of being human and also being humbled into a form of a slave, totally unrecognized, totally marginalized in a periphery. So there are so many issues this is to be focused. There are so many priests among you who will make use of these reflections for your preaching, so that you'll reach out to the hundreds and thousands of people. There are so many superiors among you, so many religious among you. You can use it in your community reflections. It's also for your personal edification, personal change, and transformation. I think this is a very important thing, and many more will be joining us actually. And so we straight away wanted to introduce the three of you. But today, the three themes will be like this. That is the historical significance of Christmas. So you may have Father John Sekar is a Franciscan friar, is a director of a media center. He's also a journalist. He's taking class in the college, and he's also the Secretary General of the province of the Franciscans OFM in Chennai, and he has been a constant supporter of these online courses, various areas. It's either secretaryship or spirituality or Franciscan spirituality or motivational sessions, anything that he takes updates on himself among all the amidst hectic work. Today, Brother John Sekar is a priest, but we call the friars all brothers. So, Brother John Sekar will be touching on the crib spirituality. What is the purpose of making visible the invisible becoming a visible? So the holistic historical significance of Christmas, and I straight away asked Brother John Sekar to take up the session, and at the end you may have some reflections or additional reflections. You may also come up with some questions and clarifications. It will be very interesting. It's a joint effort, and Brother John Sekar will be leading us into this. Welcome, Brother John Sekar. Thank you.
Thank you, Father. Thank you.
Yes.
So, greetings to everyone. And as we have begun an important season in our liturgical calendar, preparing to welcome Jesus in the solemn celebration of Christmas, we are here to reflect about Christmas in the light of St. Francis, particularly in this year, where we celebrate 800 years of St. Francis celebrating Christmas for the first time in creating a crib in Greccio. So this celebration of Christmas is always accompanied with making of crib. So there is no celebration of Christmas without having a crib. So it is important to understand why we have crib. And so to understand the significance of crib, we go back to the person and place where it all began. The person is our Holy Father St. Francis of Assisi, and the place is Greccio in and around Assisi. Though there is a tradition which believes that St. Francis of Assisi was not the first person to create the crib, and we have commissions from the Pope himself in 5th century, where a nativity scene was created. But what is so important about St. Francis of Assisi and the crib is that he created the crib and celebrated the crib during the celebration of the Eucharist. That is what is very, very important for us to understand. And the crib that we have in the present times is completely different from the crib that St. Francis actually made. What St. Francis had was a live crib. He had a real ox and he had a real cow animal with him. Yeah. So he had this, and it is also believed that a live baby was also there. So what St. Francis made was a live crib. Now, to understand the significance of crib, we need to understand the person of St. Francis of Assisi and what could have driven him, motivated him to create this crib to celebrate Christmas. So that's what I want to ask. Now it is 800 years since the crib was made in Crescio. So from the time of 1223, crib has been part of Christmas celebration. And we are now 800 years after St. Francis made the crib in Crescio. So we all ask this question, why? So it is important to ask this question, why, so as to draw inspiration from the whole process of creating the crib, experiencing the crib, praying before the crib. It is very important. It is, let us also understand that crib is not a decorative material for Christmas, though it has come down to be seen and treated, unfortunately, this manner. Crib is not a decorative element of Christmas celebration at all. Because St. Francis made the crib, celebrated it, experienced it during the Eucharist, the crib also has so much of liturgical significance. Celebration of Christmas with the crib is what makes the celebration from our end very meaningful. So we ask why? Why did St. Francis make that crib? Now, so we need to understand the time of St. Francis of Assisi, the times in which he lived, that could have motivated him to embrace this crib spirituality. We all know the kind of life St. Francis of Assisi lived, the kind of choices that he had made in living his life on this earth according to the will of God. So one of the choices in the life of St. Francis of Assisi, especially towards the end, is also creation of crib. So why? The times that he lived in influenced him and had an impact on him. So it was a time of feudal system. Feudal system means hierarchy was present. A feudal system of masters and servants, lordships and servants, superiors and inferiors. So the society was completely divided between those who held power and those who did not have any power. There was two kinds of classes, mayores and minores, nobles and the others. So the society was clearly divided. So St. Francis, in his life, chooses the minores, chooses the poor, chooses the weak, and chooses the vulnerable. Now, for me personally, the celebration of crib at Christmas is a kind of confirming why St. Francis chose to be poor, why St. Francis chose to be lesser, why St. Francis chose to walk the path of service. So that celebration of Christmas, where he saw the simplicity, humility, poverty, and vulnerability of Jesus, it was a kind of confirming the choices, series of choices that St. Francis made. So he comes from a society of masters and servants, society that was full of power, society that ill-treated the ones who did not have power. He comes from a society of inequality. So when we reflect about the situation in which St. Francis of Assisi came to be born and brought up, when St. Francis was born, the feudal system was already on the decline. So there was another system that was coming into the society. Now, inequality was not based on the accident of birth into a powerful or powerless family, but on wealth. No, so one who possessed land, they were very powerful. So that's that. So one who did not have land were powerless people. So inequality now was based on wealth, not because somebody is born in a noble class and others were born in a not noble class, the lesser class. So it is about the wealth. Someone who had more wealth became very powerful. So in that way, when we see the life of St. Francis of Assisi in the family, his father belonged to a wealthy class. So, though St. Francis does not come from a noble class, but a merchant class, when St. Francis was born, the wealth was with regard to how much money you had. St. Francis also comes from that wealthy merchant class. Initially, the power was about the land, possessions, but money came increasingly to be used and to replace barter in trade. So money, the use of money also determined as to who is powerful and who is weak. For Francis, money was an innovation, in his times, one which pointed up inequality. Money also caused inequalities. Even now, one of the sources of greatest inequalities to exist in the world is money. So perhaps this lies at the heart of why St. Francis of Assisi rejected money. So we are trying to understand why St. Francis made the crib from the kind of society that he was growing up. So it was a society of inequality, society of powerful versus powerless, society of wealthy versus destitute. That is the kind of society that St. Francis was being brought up. Now, these landowners who saw their power being threatened started to fight with the middle class of merchants and craftsmen. Now, these landowners were wealthy people because they had already land. But these merchants were growing in wealth because of trade, because of money that they were getting through the trade. So they were threatened. The landowners were traditionally rich class, were threatened by these merchants who were increasingly becoming richer and richer. So there was a there was a conflict between these two classes. So while we see a situation of conflict, inequality in the society, we also see that it was a time of battle, war between new cities, city-states. There were also tensions between Emperor Frederick II and Holy Roman Empire and successive popes, some sort of war between Christians and Muslims in the Holy Land. So it was all about, winning the power. War is all about power. War is about power. The church was also in time of change. The turning of the first millennium in 1000 had sparked a desire for reform. There had been number of meetings called councils and so on. So everywhere there was some sort of change taking place. So be it a society, be it a family of St. Francis, be it the church world, or whatever was happening had a huge impact on the life of St. Francis of Assisi. And as we reflect upon the times in which he lived, let us also understand what kind of life he chose. He did not side with the landowners. He did not side with the wealthy class. He did not side with the powerful ones. He sided with the poor, the lepers, for example, the weak. So that is what we see, moving to embrace of Christ in Bethlehem, naked, humble, simple, poor. So that's what the crib is to be seen as a culmination of the great choices that St. Francis made throughout his life. Now, Francis Bernardone, we are coming to the family. Father of Francis belonged to the minori in relation to Maiores noble. So St. Francis did not come from noble class, minor, but to that rich and powerful stratum of minori. So within the minories, not noble, they also had a hierarchy. So he belonged to the wealthy minori, which aspired to share power and privileges with the majority. Francis' family also belonged to a powerful one. So sociologists today would term this upward mobility. So Peter Bernardone, the father of St. Francis of Assisi, belonged to a minoris, but he wanted to be equivalent to the maiores. So how he could aim that is not through birth, but through the accumulation of wealth, he can come to the level of maiores. So that is upward mobility. But for St. Francis of Assisi, who belonged to that powerful, he comes down to be poor, comes down to be, that is downward mobility. So this incarnation is also to be seen as downward mobility. The greatest hymn of Canosis, written by St. Paul in Philippians, we see, though he was in the form of God, he did not count equality with God something to be grasped at. He emptied himself and took the human form and died a death on the cross. So that is the downward mobility. So the crib is all about this downward mobility of God, which is reflected in the life of St. Francis of Assisi. St. Francis of Assisi also is a downward mobility. So we also see the kind of church that was existing at the time of St. Francis of Assisi. He lived during a time many clergy were corrupt. So we also know what kind of church. It was wealthy church. It was a powerful church. He did not care so much for the poor. Medieval church, the history of medieval church is also known as Dark Ages. So there was the church carried out things that the church is not proud of today. So the time clergy were corrupt. Priests would neglect the poor, sick, in order to minister to the rich and powerful. So they thought even the whole aspect of clergy was thought of being a powerful class. One became a priest not to serve, but to wield power over others. Belonging to a clergy class would mean that somebody belonged to a powerful class, authoritative class. So that's what. So that is the kind of church also a situation, and that's the reason why St. Francis chose not to become priest, not to get caught up in the clericalism of the church. The church, now this is an important information. Not long after Francis' conversion, his father demanded that he chose between serving his family or serving the church. Now, Francis publicly disowns his father, renouncing the inheritance, social status, and the sort of familial care or protection. So, all these are all embracing what we see in the crib. Disowning his father, not necessary, but Jesus coming from the security of his father, renouncing his sizable inheritance, nothing that Jesus has for him, or any sort of familial care or protection. What St. Francis does in front of the bishop's house in Assisi is also something that St. Francis is inspired by what he sees on the cross as well as in Christ. So Francis turns his back on the world and busies himself with the work of the Lord. During the times of St. Francis of Assisi, even the Eucharistic celebration was extraordinary. Now, while reading up for this important session, this particular information relating to the abuses of Eucharist present in the times of St. Francis of Assisi inspired me. Why St. Francis of Assisi celebrated the crib during the Eucharistic celebration. So Eucharist became merely ritual. Eucharist has become commercialized. Eucharist did not have the significance of the real presence of Jesus Christ. St. Francis wanted to revive the real significance of the Eucharist. So we see throughout the writings of St. Francis of Assisi, be it Admonition 1, be it his letter to the rulers of the world, letter to the head of the order, the custodian of the order, letter to the minister, letter to the entire order. In all this, including of rule and testament, St. Francis lays great emphasis for the Eucharist, that the body and blood of Jesus Christ coming alive. Now, it's not in the Jesus became alive in Bethlehem. Bethlehem is house of bread. Eucharist is we feed on bread. So what happens in the Eucharist, St. Francis wants to see what happened in Bethlehem. So that's also one of the reasons why St. Francis chose to celebrate Christmas by bringing alive Jesus in the form of babe. to really see how Jesus is alive in the Eucharist is a counter-cultural witness to the kind of abuses that were present at the time of St. Francis of Assisi regarding the Eucharist. This is another important information related to the lepers. Now, Saint Jesus on the manger in Bethlehem is, he enjoys identity with the lepers, somebody who is on the periphery. Now, why did St. Francis choose to serve the lepers, choose to be with the lepers? And what was the attitude towards the lepers during the time of St. Francis of Assisi? Particularly, how did the church treat the lepers? 2 years before Francis was born, the Third Lateran Council, 1179, was. Now, this council dealt with so many topics. 23rd canon of this Lateran Council is important. It addressed how priests should go about ministering to the lepers. Although affirming the personhood, potential piety of lepers, the canon also stated, we do not wish that what is granted them on the score of piety should result in harm to others. So, ministering to the lepers was considered harmful by the church itself. So this canon dictated that lepers cannot dwell with the healthy or come to church with others. So lepers are sidelined, ostracized from the society. Same canon also suggested that lepers should have their own churches and cemeteries, a clear mark of division. Most noteworthy of all, their own priests. So St. Francis, though not a priest, is someone who chose to serve the lepers living with them. It was considered to be highly contagious diseases. It was incurable. So the Lateran Council exempted priests from ministering to lepers, protecting them from contracting leprosy. But St. Francis challenges the whole thing. And he chose to be with the lepers. Why? Because he saw the helplessness of Jesus in Bethlehem, helplessness of Jesus in his incarnation. And therefore, he could stand in solidarity with the helplessness of lepers who have no place to live, who are ostracized from the society. So all these choices that St. Francis chose to serve the leper is also to be seen in the light of experience of the vulnerability of Jesus in Bethlehem. St. Francis also took a trip to Holy Land. He met Sultan, where he made peace with the Sultan. But St. Francis also visited the holy places. So the St. Francis in 1220. So St. Francis was mainly attracted by Bethlehem. So he thought of Bethlehem very often. He lost in the memories of those unique emotions he had felt while walking in the Lord's footsteps in the Holy Land. So seeing the holy sight of Christ's birth, life, death, and resurrection made them feel all the more real. All these places were real to St. Francis of Assisi. Those places brought Jesus real to, live to. So he wants to recreate that experience of what he had in Bethlehem. The real experience of Christ being born in Bethlehem is something that St. Francis wants to create in Assisi, in Gresham. Now, whatever we have seen so far are what I would call as historical reasons that would have led St. Francis to celebrate Christmas, creating a live group. Why? All these reasons. Now, another important aspect also is identity. St. Francis' identity is that he is a lesser brother, friar minor. Now, that identity is rediscovered by St. Francis of Assisi 3 years before his death, 1223, in Gresham. So identity is confirmed. Identity is rediscovered. If Jesus chose to be born in a vulnerable state, then he also chooses to be vulnerable, lesser. No, it is the lesser unfortunate ones who were born in a place like where Jesus was born. That's what we see. Just as the servant of Jesus, poor and humble, chose to incarnate himself in the poverty of Bethlehem and in the cultural setting of hard-working village labor in Palestine, so too Francis and his brothers, following the footsteps of Jesus incarnate, made a definitive choice to incarnate themselves in socio-economic cultural setting of the lowest minority of us. So the forma vitae, the form of life, St. Francis embraced, and the form of life that followers of St. Francis of Assisi live is all fruit of St. Francis' experience of Jesus in incarnation. Now, how did this play a role in the life of early followers of St. Francis of Assisi? Many of the early brothers came either from Mayori, noble class, or a rich Minori, merchant family. So, whether it is Mayori or a rich Minori, they all belong to a wealthy class. And for them, the choice to live as with a minimi meant a downward mobility. The word minimi here means minor, no, lesser brother, lesser, to be little. That's what it means, to be little. So when they all chose to become lesser brothers, a downward mobility. So let me say that this downward mobility is what is confirmed in crib making of St. Francis of Assisi. That they all have made a right choice, becoming lesser, becoming weaker, becoming powerless, keeping themselves away from any sort of authority. That is what is confirmed in the crib by them. So Francis refers to this in the Testament with the words, I left the world. So it was a process of St. Francis, his brothers, opting out of one social identity, or rich minority, and taking on another, a process of re-identification. So if we can see this aspect of leaving one identity, embracing another, we would see very much in the crib. Jesus leaves the identity of being divine, confining themselves to the heavens, comes down to take another identity as human. No, the vulnerability of humans. So that's what we see. So what happens in the life of St. Francis of Assisi is what we is because what happened in Bethlehem, because what happened in the mystery of incarnation. So inspired by the example of servant Jesus, who said, I have come not to be served, but to serve. Poor humble Francis and his brothers chose to follow his footsteps, incarnating themselves among the many. Now, this group becomes the point of reference for Francis and his brothers to shape their new identity. Now, who are these minimis in Assisi? Lepers, the poor, those who did not have land, those who did not belong to the merchant family. These are the people. It is with them St. Francis identified. Now, just imagine the kind of birth that our Lord Jesus took. And with the kind of birth, whom did he identify himself with? It was the shepherds, people who had no place. No, so that's what we see. So these are the points of reference. They undertook a new project in the medieval church. Now we come to reflect upon certain significance. Now I asked the very second slide, why? Now, this, what you see on the screen, is the reason Thomas Celano, the first biographer, a hagiographer of St. Francis of Assisi, writes as a reason. What was the intention of St. Francis? St. Francis' chief intention, his principal desire, supreme purpose, in and through all things, to observe the Holy Gospel. All, and with all watchfulness, all zeal, all the longing of his mind, and all the fervor of his heart, perfectly to follow the teachings of Lord Jesus Christ and tread in his footsteps. So that is the whole life of St. Francis of Assisi summed up. Holy Gospel, observe the Holy Gospel, perfectly live the Holy Gospel. So in order to live the holy gospel, to live the holy gospel, you should understand the person of Christ too, where he was incarnate. So he would recall his words with assiduous meditation, dwell on his works with the most piercing consideration, Jesus' words, and chiefly did the humility of the incarnation, charity of the person, so occupy his memory that he would scarce ponder over anything else. So nothing else came to the mind of St. Francis of Assisi except these two important events: humility of incarnation, charity of passion. Now, both of these are signified very well in the life of St. Francis. Humility of incarnation through his act of creating the crib, charity of the passion through the reception of stigmata, the jubilee which we will celebrate the next year. So, two important aspects that prove St. Francis of Assisi making the person that he did become is humility of incarnation, charity of passion. So, if he was so full of the humility of incarnation, he could not grasp it with his own mind. The humility of incarnation, how could God become man, is something that he couldn't understand, he couldn't feel. So he wanted to make the incarnation tangible, if I may use the word feelable, experiential. That's what he wanted to make. And that's the reason why he created the crib. Something that his mind could not confine in its boundaries. St. Francis wants to see it physically before his very eyes in order to touch and feel that God did become human. That's the reason why he makes the crib. So Thomas Celano writes, he desired to represent the birth of that child in Bethlehem in such a way that with our bodily eyes we may see what Jesus suffered for lack of the necessities of newborn babe, and how he lay manger between the ox and us. So the lines are suffered, suffered. The suffering of Jesus, lack of necessities, the poverty, lay in manger, humility, simplicity. So in the manger of our Lord Jesus, and Francis saw all these virtues. Now, the story of St. Francis of Assisi and the Christmas crib at Greccio focuses on what was really important to St. Francis: the poverty of Jesus, the discomfort felt by the baby, and the three virtues: simplicity, poverty, humility. And leads us to understand the poverty of Francis is in imitation of poverty of Jesus. I said, St. Francis made a choice to become a lesser brother. St. Francis made a choice to become poor. St. Francis made a choice to become humble. So in this part, so he knew he has made all these choices. The biographers write that St. Francis did have a trouble with regard to what he started, the gospel project. St. Francis also had trouble with his own brothers with regard to the rule. So St. Francis would have wondered, am I on the right path? Am I doing the right thing? Is it God's will? So to confirm what he was doing is right, he celebrates Christmas in Greccio. And there, with his bodily eyes, he sees the poverty of Christ, the humility of Christ, the simplicity of Christ, the suffering of Christ. And then it would have been a great source of consolation that St. Francis did make a right choice. So confirming the simple, poor, humble life of St. Francis takes place in Greccio. In the act of creating crib, the confirmation of St. Francis' choice takes place. So for Francis, the external poverty of Christ's birth in Bethlehem is representative of radical poverty of incarnation. So he saw the radical poverty in the crib, in the little baby Jesus in Greccio, in the presence of the ox and the ass. He saw the real poverty of Christ. And then he said to himself, yes, I did make the right choice. If it was for Christ, then it is also for me. Poverty, simplicity, humility. So that's what we see. through the historical events, and Francis comes to make right choices in his life, and those choices are confirmed by the final act of celebrating Christmas in Christian. So, what is for us crib? Now we are talking about crib spirituality. So, just as we asked a question, why St. Francis made the crib, we also need to ask this question, why? Why do we make crib? For St. Francis, it was an experience, tangible experience of Christ. Was poor, simple, humble suffering, a tangible, real experience. What crib is for us? Either when we make the crib or when we stand before the crib and pray before the crib, what does crib communicate to us? Are we wondering at the kind of creativity that has gone into creation the crib, which is important, we need to appreciate. And St. Francis of Assisi was a man of creativity. His creativity resulted in crib, so we need to appreciate the creativity. But why St. Francis made the crib is what should inspire us to look at the crib, embrace the crib. So re-examine how we celebrate Christmas or any other liturgical feast, ensuring that they reflect simplicity, poverty, humility of St. Francis. Humility that Francis of Assisi desired. So for St. Francis of Assisi, the crib was a reflection on simplicity of Jesus, a reflection on simplicity of poverty of Jesus, a reflection on the humility of Jesus. The crib, he saw the poverty, simplicity, humility of Jesus reflected. So in our cribs, as we stand before, what do they reflect? What do we learn from it? The simplicity was honored, the poverty was exalted, the humility was commended. In the Thomas Celano writes, there in Greccio, simplicity was honored, poverty exalted, humility commended, and of Greccio there was made, as it were, a new Bethlehem. Greccio became Bethlehem. The choice of St. Francis of Assisi was confirmed, is what I would add. So if Greccio became Bethlehem, crib spirituality invites that wherever we are celebrating Christmas in this year 1223, that place, whether it is a community or a home or a church, that it should become Bethlehem. The experience of Bethlehem, of Mary, Joseph, little born Jesus, it should become our own experience too. So that is what is important. When you read the narrative of St. Francis, narrative of Thomas Celano, or narrative of Bonaventure with regard to the celebration of Christmas in Greccio, we see details. I'm sure in the course of the other days, they will go into the details, but some important details is how St. Francis, the disposition of St. Francis. So when St. Francis held the baby Jesus in his arm, there was a vision where someone saw the baby coming alive. A clear relation to the Eucharist, that Jesus came alive. When St. Francis pronounced the name Jesus, it was tasting sweet. His tongue was, it was mouth-watering, and you could feel the sweetness of pronouncing the name of Jesus. And it is because it was in a manger when St. Francis started to sing the gospel and call the babe of Bethlehem, that the sound was like the bleating of the lamb. So the involvement of St. Francis of Assisi in the crib is what is very, very. So the crib brought Jesus alive to him. The crib got St. Francis involved in the birth of Jesus. So he was not a spectator. He was not an audience. He was a person who was present as when Jesus was born. So that's the invitation for us also. So just as the historical situations influenced the Francis to celebrate Christmas, what is our history? What is happening in the world today? And how our crib would become a response to what's happening in the society, the societal problems, the problems in the church, problems in our own communities, problems in our own personal lives can be experienced along with Jesus, and then we can find a crib as an answer to all that we have, the questions that we have with regard to the kinds of problems that we have. So that's what I would reflect with you on this particular day, the crypt spirituality and the historical significance. So just before we end, in order to place ourselves in the context of this show, I will play a video. Maybe this video is around 8 minutes. We have time, but this will speak to us about why Gretchen, why St. Francis chose Gretchen. So let's listen. Let's watch this video.
Located at the heart of Italy's Apennine Mountains, surrounded by oak forests, the town of Greccio is perched high atop one of the hills overlooking the Rheatina Valley, also known as the Sacred Valley. According to tradition, a Greek family founded Greccio as a colony and settled down in this land after falling in love with the beauty of the surrounding countryside. Hence the origin of the name, Greccio, from the Italian Greci, meaning Greeks. The earliest records documenting this medieval town date back to the 10th and 11th centuries. They show how, from the remains of the ancient buildings, Greccio became a fortified medieval castle, surrounded by walls and protected in the middle of the forested mountains by 6 watchtowers. It was just over a mile away from the walled town that nearly 800 years ago, the inhabitants of Greccio witnessed something simple yet extraordinary, something that eventually spread across the entire world, the tradition of the nativity scene. It all began in the year 1223. Back from the Holy Land, a young hermit named Francis, known as the Poor Man of Assisi, passed through this area on his way back home. Struck by the breathtaking beauty of the countryside, which reminded him so much of the holy city of Bethlehem, Francis of Assisi had the idea of reliving the mystery of the birth of the Son of God. For this reason, he didn't hesitate to enlist the help of the local inhabitants, the citizens of Greccio.
Francis had one dream, to relive with his own eyes what newborn Jesus had suffered for humanity. And this dream of his came true on Christmas Eve 1223, when he asked his friend and owner of these caves, Giovanni di Greccio, known as Il Velita, to prepare in that cave what was needed for the event. All Francis needed was a stone, which is still there, a bit of hay, an ass, an ox, and an altar. Some say there was also a baby, a simulacrum. Others don't mention this simulacrum at all. But during the celebration, Giovanni Velita and others have a vision. On the stone, they see a baby waking up from a long sleep. The baby smiles at Francis, and Francis embraces him and adores him.
Sonno lungo e sorride a Francesco. E Francesco lo abbraccia e lo adora.
And it was exactly in this place where in 1228 the Hermitage of Greccio Sanctuary was erected. It was precisely the year the Church celebrated the canonization of the Saint of Assisi. The beating heart of the Hermitage Sanctuary of Greccio is the cave, known as the Chapel of the Manger. In this place, on the altar, you can see a section of the original stone on which St. Francis placed a representation of Jesus during the first living nativity scene in 1223. The frescoes that adorn the front walls of the chapel in the cave depict two closely interwoven scenes, the Nativity in Bethlehem and the Nativity in Greccio. In the foreground of this latter fresco, Francis, clad in the white robe of a deacon, is kneeling in adoration of the child, and a bit above, the priest is celebrating Mass. In the background are the other protagonists of this wonderful event, among them Giovanni Vellita, his wife, and all the people of Greccio.
La notte del Natale del 1223.
The very first time in history the nativity scene was represented was here, on Christmas Eve in 1223. And because it was the first time, they had no reference to guide them. Greccio was indeed a rather atypical nativity scene, a bit different from what we can find now in Italian families and all over the world. It's the only one without the Virgin Mary and Joseph, because it was created with people from Greccio, so St. Francis, Giovanni Vellita, the people of Greccio, and then others like the shepherds of the Arieti Valley, and so on.
La fece da padrona.
Tutta la notte senza sosta gli ha preparato per te un'immagine del bambino Gesù.
Since that very distant year, every Christmas, the inhabitants of Greccio have relived those historic moments with pride.
Popolo di Dio, ascendiamo sannando.
Ogni anno rivochiamo questi fatti perché fanno
We
parte.
relive these events every year because they form part of our history, part of our heart, and also part of the iconographic heritage, which is universal, which is acknowledged as universal, even though sometimes it's also, well, the victim of too much talking, because no religion is in contrast with the nativity scene and its iconography. Different people have different opinions, and this is good. But the nativity is something that unites us rather than divides us, and so Greccio too unites and doesn't divide.
Quindi Greccio unisce e non divide.
Mi chiamo Federico.
My name is Federico, and in the Nativity I represent St. Francis. I've been representing Francis for 8 years, but I was part of this even before, ever since I was 6. I'm 43 now, so I've been in this for quite a while.
Bene a voi, popolo prediletto. Sia rappresentare la figura di San Francesco, ma anche
I feel this thing also belongs to me, representing St. Francis, but also the common person from the people. It's all very emotional. If we all create our own nativity scenes today, it's because St. Francis created the first here on that night. So, of course, the most moving part is the last, where Francis built the nativity for the first time in history.
nell'atto di realizzare il presepe vivente vero e proprio.
Mi chiamo Natalino.
My name is Natalino, and I've been part of the Nativity of Greccio for 8 years now. For me, this is a great experience, seeing St. Francis by my side, very near me. And what else can I say? I'm fascinated by my role as the Lord of Greccio, happy to help the saint represent the Nativity in Greccio back in 1223.
Nel rappresentare il presepio di Greccio nel lontano 1223.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Brother John Sekar, because this is a very, very enlightening and emotional presentation. You are taken us actually to the Middle Ages or the 13th century of Francis. It's not just a crib, as we said in the beginning itself. It's not just crib. It's a value. It's a proclamation. It's a prophetic proclamation to the entire world. What is the significance of simplicity, humility, poverty, and downgrade, the movement down, what is that? What do you say?
Downward.
Downward movement. I think this is a very, very significant. Yeah, today it's a more and more, even religious, we have the temptation to go for an upward movement. And the Franciscan life entirely, you see, every religious life should be a downward movement. And Jesus has started this downward movement from by his birth, and you are taken away from this. There are some non-Franciscans also. Probably, I want to explain to them how this Franciscan life they are celebrating this 800 years of crib. The crib has become a decorative mood. At the same time, it's very even the emotional excitement to see that gloomy eyes, the light, dim light, and light music, and the caroling, the children going around, running, everything gives a pleasant mood. But on the other side, there's a culture of respecting the lowly ones. Yeah, yesterday, I think yesterday in the responsorial song, he raised up the lowly. He raises up the lowly. He wants to raise up the lowly. I think we have to raise up the lowly. Therefore, I think as a religious, as a Christian, we have this duty to become part and parcel of this downward movement. Thank you, Brother John Sager. I leave this for this floor to open for any additions and any clarifications. It's a very, very, very useful, very nice. Leave the floor open. Anybody? Yeah, there are some compliments. It's good, and actually, you can make use of this sharing because brother will be giving this in the PowerPoint. You can definitely use this. There are a good number of Franciscans are also there, secular Franciscans. They can certainly broaden this. So there's, I think, Andrea says this. Now I realize that too many of the crib. There's a compliment from many. Gloria Goda, Emelda, then yeah, Myanmar MSBS sisters are there. They are very good. And Andreas is saying that is special meaning. Yes. And Josie Neela and yes, CJM Philippines, they're all very complimenting very much. Sister Marina BS, thank you for the inspiration and enlightenment. Yes. Sister Mary Augustine, thank you for the talk on crib spiritual. Yes. I'm fortunate to participate. Sister Theophane. Tabeth, wishing also, she's wishing already, yes. Anthony Rufus is saying, John Schaefer, really wonderful, yes. And Mukti, Vinodan, Kulas, all of them are giving the compliments. Sister Nasia, thank you for John for the beautiful message. Have a joyful time when we are participating in the coming of the Lord, yes. From Pakistan, yes, okay, Nasia from Pakistan. Lector Christos, let Christos. The compliments, Andreas again. Can you explain what confirmed St. Francis? What confirmed St. Francis? Yes.
What I meant was like St. Francis made a choice,
Yes.
an unpopular choice in his time to be poor, to embrace simplicity. So when he celebrated that Christmas, the choice to be poor was confirmed in the person of Jesus. The choice to call himself a lesser brother was confirmed. A choice to tell the brothers that they should not hold any positions of authority. They should consider themselves as servants to one another. That all those, the form of life St. Francis gave to his brothers was confirmed in the person of Jesus Christ born in Bethlehem. That's what I meant.
Yeah,
No,
it's a very, very good question. Yes.
Brother Sekar, excuse me. What I want to know is now he made a live crib on that day at the Eucharist.
Yes.
And what confirmed him that this is the way that he has to live.
What confirmed him would mean that the poverty of Jesus that he saw in the celebration of Mars Ingratio, the poverty
Yeah.
of Jesus,
Okay.
the simplicity of Jesus, the vulnerability of Jesus, that confirmed St. Francis of Assisi, that St. Francis of Assisi actually chose the right path, actually chose the right form of life. That's what that the whole event of Gratio confirmed in St. Francis.
Okay.
Yeah, there's one more point, Brother Andreas. That is, in the just 1 month before, Francis gets the approval of the rule.
Yes.
The rule of 1223 on 29th of November. But this particular life is, it was not easy to get because it's a completely another type of life. It's a challenging life. It's unheard of going to live without property and without anything of their own, leaving everything, typically taking the gospel poverty and to become nobody. How to start this life? How to give this? But they got this. The whole life of the rule of 1223 or 1221 is again a crib spirituality. The entering into the humanity, humility, and the downward movement. Yeah, downward movement of Jesus Christ in the Eucharist is not a liturgy, but rather it calls for a change to enter into the lowly ones. I think that is the confirmation was doubting whether it's correct, whether in the right path. I think that when he celebrated this crib, he found this is the Eucharist is again present in the crib. The Eucharistic Lord is again visibly present. So, Eucharist is mystical. This is a practical.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you, brother. Thank you for the good question. Yes. There's Andreas, unmute. Yes, unmuted. Yes.
Okay,
Inspiring
Brother.
insight.
Thank you.
Yes. Teresa, Jairani, thank you. That's good. Sister Angeline, Christmas meaning. Yeah, it makes explanation, participation of Christmas meaningfully. Maria Teresa, Rose. Yes, Rose asked whether the points will be there. Yeah, we'll be sharing that. Yes. Veronica, thank you for the inspiring new. Yes. And there's YouTube also is given the link is given in the chat box. You can utilize it. Sister Amla Chennai asking, thank you million, brother, for the first crop for that made by the first crib, yeah, made by Francis. I visited those places. It's very moving. Even in Bethlehem, the capuchin all over taking care some way is connected. Thanks for taking down the timeline. Excellent, Sister Amla. Veritas Soko. Thank you. This is my first time knowing about the spirituality of the crib. God bless you. Yes. Then Maria Therese, thank you for I have understood the spirituality of real crib. We'll share about it and practice as Francis intended. Yes. Caroline Fawn from Cameroon. Father, thank you so much. I will celebrate Christmas this year with special meaning. Excellent, sister. Wonderful, wonderful. Yes. Actually, this many look at it. Okay, decorations need some singing, all this need for children. Okay. And for us who look differently through the Franciscan eye or through the gospel eyes, we have to create a prophetic message. Crib itself is a prophetic message, challenging the world that believes in money, challenging the world that believes in power and authority, challenging the world that does not recognize the poor. They are nobody. But Jesus takes the center stage to become nobody. And there is a value in those who are considered lowly, the lepers, the thieves. The thieves and robbers are also among the lepers, the rejected ones from the Assisi. So we need to think those people who are in the prison also part of these lepers, beggars, and the poor, the destitutes. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Anto Christias. So thank you. If there's any questions, you'll still there is time, brother. You or John Sekar will surely help us tomorrow. Also, there is time. He'll join. Tomorrow we will have a talk by Sister Stella Balthasar, FMM. She'll be touching on the socio-cultural significance of Christmas then and now, how it is significant, especially with the children, women. This is a very big issue. It is not settled issue. The women, the way humanity, the human society, treating women or children, vulnerables. They become vulnerable, even though they are the family maker, they are the global social makers, but they are taken for granted. So therefore, how it was significant for Mother Mary and today's women, how it's significant for baby Jesus and today's baby. I think these are the things that will be continued tomorrow. Sister Emily says, thank you so much, brother. Before celebrating Christmas, this reflection is needed. Excellent, sister. Yes. The joy of visiting Great Show. Ah, very good. Some people have visited Great Show. Yes. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, yes,
one question is there that Mary Claire is asking, are you saying that St. Francis knew his unpopular choice to be poor, etc., was confirmed only after he experienced the grip in Greccio? So I wouldn't say that only Greccio was the moment of confirmation. For St. Francis of Assisi, there were several moments of confirmation, but it is also would be true to say that St. Francis had his moments of troubles and difficulties also with regard to how his form of life was shaping up, especially by the followers who came immediately after St. Francis of Assisi. That the testament that St. Francis wrote right before his death brings about the kind of sentiments that St. Francis was undergoing. So towards the end of his life, now this script is just 3 years before the death of St. Francis of Assisi. There were several moments of confirmation for St. Francis about his life. This is one of such moments of confirmation, but it is because script. It is because script in the Eucharist. It is because the vision that St. Francis had of Jesus coming alive. Francis was part of that vision. I would say that the poverty of Christ, simplicity of Christ, humility of Christ, once St. Francis saw it tangibly, St. Francis knew for certainty, for all surety, that was the right path. So it is one of the many moments of confirmation, but because it is script, I would say that is the final confirmation moment.
Yeah, that was a very good question, sister. Actually, Francis they had a very, very tough time with the brothers because they were not ready for gospel poverty. They were ready for voluntary poverty, something downward movement, but not the gospel poverty, not the painful experience of a prophet. So therefore, he was not. Actually, it is another important thing is to know that to realize spirituality in flesh and blood, because at that time liturgy, rubrical, the magisterium, that was taking upper hand, but leaving the nuances of human life, nuances of love, relationship, kindness, understanding, acceptance, embracing, touching, feeling, senses. I think all these things were not there. The spirituality was something otherworldly, so we were this worldly. But Francis becomes a fusion of divinity and humanity in this kind of visible celebration. That's also another important thing. Francis wanted it visible. He wanted to touch Jesus. Therefore, that live Jesus. I think the live Jesus between the ox, that I think the Spirit is saying, there was no Jesus, there is no crib with Joseph and Mother Mary, no, with a donkey and ox. So that is visible. Everything should be alive. I want to touch. I want to see. I think there's stop the singing. I want to listen the cry of the baby. I think that's something like there is on wordings. Stop, enough. We want to listen to the cry of the baby Jesus. That was Francis. That is why he said, Laudato Si. I want to brothers and sister. Everything was like like pantheism. It's, everything parts and parts of one kind of fusion of divinity on earth. He felt that. And we as Franciscan, we as religious, we are supposed to bring divinity in everywhere. Wherever we go, whatever you speak, whatever you touch, that divinity should be expressed. That is one of the things where crib spirituality comes. The divinity expressed in humanity, divinity expressed in flesh and blood, the word becoming flesh. I think I can give a life to my brother and sister. I can also bring death to my brother and sister through my word. How can I make my word incarnate? I think that incarnation is also a very, very important aspect of this visible Jesus. Yes, brother. Yes, brother. John Sekar, you want to conclude?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. You can unmute yourself and thank brother directly. So it's very nice. Thank you. Tomorrow the same time we'll meet. Many of you are sacrificing your crib and carols and attending this session. As a big group of sisters are there, I think. Yes. Welcome all of you. Yes.
Thanks, Father.
Thank you. Come